good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So we have Ms. Atiya Khan over here, the granddaughter of the great Mujahid-e-Azam of Hyderabad Deccan, Qasim Rizvi. So we are going to question her about something. The struggle for Hyderabad collapsed. Like, if you see, the Nawab of Junagadh is still present in Karachi, and he actually has a Junagadh house, and he's somehow trying for the struggle. He has appealed to the United Nations recently for the state of Junagadh. So Kashmir issue is still on the hotbed. So why Hyderabad issue has collapsed?
So I think that after Nanaba was arrested and the Nizam actually conceded to the state, there was no one left to take the struggle forward. You know, the Prime Minister escaped to Pakistan and so forth. So where was the leadership that would have taken this forward? And I think after 10 years had passed and my grandfather came back to Pakistan, there was too much water under the bridge, and he was just too disappointed, and he felt it was a lost case by then.
There was a delegation led by Moin Nawaz Jung who went to the United Nations to appeal the case.
Yeah.
The Nizam withdrew the case, but even then the delegation didn't withdraw, saying it was under the pressure of the Indian government. So was the delegation in touch with Qasim Rizvi after he landed in Pakistan?
I'm not sure about that, but I do know that the United Nations Security Council initially they quoted the fact that the succession was under duress, that the Nizam was under duress, and therefore they were not going to accept the Nizam.
The issue was under observation even until late 1960s, I believe.
Yes, I think, and there have been related issues that have kept cropping up,
Even in 2011 or 12, a Pakistani representative to the United Nations raised the question of Hyderabad, but that was completely ignored by every other nation.
Yeah. It needs a very consistent, effort. It can't just be random, something once in 10 years won't work. And unfortunately, the situation in India is so volatile and so threatening to the Muslims there that nobody really has the courage to take up these issues within India. It probably will have to come from outside.
Yeah. So what's the scene of escape? There's a huge hype, there's a rumor created that Qasim Rizvi actually wantedly escaped within 48 hours he was scared or something. But then when the Operation Polo took place, he actually went to the Deccan radio station and announced that I was born here, I will die with you, I'll get buried in this soil of the nation. So why did he escape to Pakistan?
So to say that he escaped is a ridiculous statement, because obviously after the Operation Polo, he presented himself to the Indian authorities. He spent 9 years as a political prisoner. He fought his own case and won from a military tribunal. But one of the conditions of releasing him, even though they had no right to keep him, to keep him in prison anyway, because he won the case, they were not able to prove a single allegation against him. But yet, because it was a military tribunal and they had full authority, the condition was that he has to leave India within 48 hours.
Okay.
So it's not something that he chose, but it's something that was forced upon him.
Okay. So there was this rumor, actually it's not a rumor, Ayub Khan, the late military general of Pakistan, the president of Pakistan, he actually writes in his diary that someone informed him that Qasim Rizvi was taking bribes from people in Hyderabad, or else he would have helped the Hyderabad army. So how true is that?
Sorry, what? I didn't get that question.
Ayub Khan, the late president of Pakistan, he writes in his personal diary that when Hyderabad was being attacked, someone from Hyderabad informed him that Qasim Rizvi was actually taking bribes and running a one-man show. So what I've heard is that some opponents of Qasim Rizvi actually approached Ayub Khan and misinformed him about the
First of all,
situation.
Ayub Khan was not there during the time of the fall of Deccan.
I mean, he was not in power, but then he was a military general even at that time,
Was he?
1940. Yeah.
Was he the military general? Ayub
No,
Khan at that time?
he was not the head, but
Yeah.
he had some
So he was
influence.
insignificant at
on-
that
yeah.
time. You know what I mean? And that just seems like a very silly statement, and
Yeah.
I would want to know where it's written, because there's a lot of false propaganda that has been spread in India which has no basis in fact.
I don't remember the
What?
entire name, but
Yeah.
the initial name was Shakil. Some person named Shakil.
Yeah. I mean, what I understand about the time is that it was right after. So, my grandfather and Qaeda Azam were constantly in touch,
Okay.
and the idea was that Hyderabad would resist the Indian invasion.
Okay.
And then there would have to be a discussion, because the opposite situation was true in Kashmir, for instance,
Yeah.
where the Raja was
Hindu.
a Hindu,
Yeah.
but the majority of the population
Muslim.
was Muslim.
Yeah.
And in this case, the leadership or the king was Muslim and the majority population was Hindu. So they cannot have been right in both situations,
yeah.
and they would have had to then choose one. Okay, what is legal?
Yeah.
Right, the succession wise. So Qaeda Azam was fully invested and supporting the Hyderabad resistance movement, but the timing was, Sardar Patel chose that time right after the death of Qaeda Azam to attack Hyderabad, because he knew that Pakistan would be in a state of
Complete chaos.
chaos and
Yeah.
confusion,
Yeah.
and would not be able to respond appropriately. And there would have, I think, been an international outcry had not the Nizam, for his own personal selfish reasons and cowardice, conceded at that moment.
So, what was his occupation after he left for Pakistan? Did he practice law among the Muhajirin, as it's stated on the Wikipedia, or was there any other occupation as well?
No, so he got a lot of offers to join the government. I think even the prime ministership, and lots of positions were offered to him, and he was asked to take leadership of the Muslim League, but he refused all those political positions and offers because he was very disheartened with politics, and he just wanted to earn his own living as a practicing lawyer and live a very quiet life.
Was he recognized as a hero or something among the Hyderabadi disposer that was living in Karachi?
I think there was a mixed feeling. Yes, there were a lot of people who, until today, take him as a hero and somebody who never compromised, his position and stayed very strong despite all the sacrifices, because the whole community sacrificed a lot, including their lives, and including my own family, because obviously we had to leave everything behind and sacrifice everything. But there was also, I think, a group of people that kind of felt at that time, was it necessary? We had such a good life in India, and did we really have to sacrifice everything? What if we'd compromised? And I think that all those questions are being answered today, because now when I speak to the Muslims in India, they say, oh, now we understand what Qasim Rizvi was saying at that time. We couldn't really understand it at that time. But now it's so blatant what he was talking about.
So there was a rumor I heard from a Hindu friend of mine. So he says Qasim Rizvi used to put a cigarette in the mouth of a Hindu early morning and practice his shooting skills. So that's completely ridiculous. I mean, what I have heard is there's a district called Nanded in Maharashtra state of India. So the Muslims had somehow attacked a Gurudwara or a temple in Nanded. So Qasim Rizvi came there, and he actually it was not the Muslims, it was the Razakars who attacked the temple or Gurudwara. So Qasim Rizvi actually came and he banned the Majlis Ittihad Muslimin of that Nanded district and refused to pray with the Muslims of Nanded district, saying that I won't pray with you, like people like you.
Yeah.
So he actually missed the Juma prayer and went to, I guess, Usmanabad. There's a district called Usmanabad. So he prayed Zohar namaz there instead of Juma. So,
Right. So, I mean, look, Hyderabad was really, and the Razakar movement itself was really one of the few places in India where there was a lot of harmony between Hindu Muslims, and also in the Nizam's government and stuff like that. There were a lot of very senior people who were Hindu. There were Hindus who were part of the Razakar movement. So it was about the independence of Hyderabad Deccan, whether it was Muslim or Hindu. This narrative of the Razakars being anti-Hindu and doing a lot of violence against Hindus and all of that is completely a false narrative, and a narrative that was basically, and if you look at some of the statements of the RSS people from that time and even the communist people of that time, they have slowly started to confess that how they managed to secure Hyderabad by actually sending out these groups who pretended to be Razakars but were actually members of RSS or the Communist Party, and their job was to go into Hyderabad and acting as Razakars, do all these atrocities so that the Razakars would get a bad name. So this kind of a kind of infiltration into Hyderabad Deccan had started years before to prepare the ground,
manipulate the narrative.
To manipulate the narrative and prepare the justification for an illegal, hijacking of the state.
So actually, there's the army chief of Hyderabad. His name was Major General Al Idrus. So he writes in his book that Qasim Rizvi, after the Hyderabad state had fallen, he actually had a huge pistol in his hand and he was threatening that he'll suicide in case if he was to be arrested. How true is that?
There are all these ridiculous kind of narratives, but I think the more reliable one was that he was actually waiting for them to arrest him, and he was fully prepared to fight his own case. I mean, he had all the opportunities, to escape.
I've also heard that when Deputy Police Commissioner, his name I guess was Yusuf something, so he came to arrest Mr. Rizvi, so he actually made him wait and then changed his clothes to the Razakar uniform. He wanted to be arrested as a Razakar, not as a politician.
Yeah. Well, he was someone who was very dramatic in his own way, So I'm sure, something like that could be possible. So,
what was his advice to the youth? What will be your advice to the youth? To carry forward his legacy? What do we do to carry forward his legacy?
Well, you have to have that kind of courage, right? Of how the people, our forefathers had the courage to give their life and not compromise on their principles. But unfortunately, from that time onwards, there has been so much violence, atrocities, towards the Muslim population, starting of course with Hyderabad Deccan, but now it's
spread
across. Of course there's Kashmir issue as well, but now it's attacking every Muslim in India. So this is what one has to understand, that if you give leeway, it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. It's not like, okay, it's restricted to Hyderabad, it's restricted to Kashmir, it's not going to affect us, so let's just ignore it. it just keeps multiplying and getting worse and worse. So to a point where you see India today, where there is forced conversions, there is a great violence and atrocities against anyone who is a proud Muslim or is talking about Muslim rights. I think there's such a huge population of Muslim youth in India now. There needs to be some kind of either political or social movement or force to bring them together and really fight for their rights. Because yes, as individuals, people can be targeted, but as a group, if you come together as a community, it becomes much more powerful. Unfortunately, it seems that MIM has not been able to be the unifying political force for the Muslims, and I would, be very open to hear, the people from Hyderabad, their comments about why that is, because that is the only Muslim political force in India. So that's unfortunate.
So, why was he not given a hero welcome back in Pakistan? He had faced 9 years of jail, but then the Pakistani government did not do anything.
But that's again an Indian narrative. That's not true. Like I said earlier, that all the politicians came to him at that time, the government officials came to him at that time. They wanted him to get more actively involved. To be a more public figure, to take over the Muslim League and so forth. And he's the one who said, no, I don't want to. I have nothing left to say. So
did he get involved in any public affairs in Karachi?
Nothing.
Apart from politics,
No politics, no public role at all.
Yeah.
He just wanted to retire and just have a very quiet life and practice law. I think he felt that the events had just exposed everyone, and he was not going to give his support to any of the groups. He just felt that nobody was worth supporting at that time.
Did he ever think of coming back to Hyderabad, or his heart was lying there?
Yes, absolutely. The whole family, and we're banned basically.
To visit India?
So nobody was allowed to visit. His children had wanted to visit as well. He himself would have not ever wanted to leave India.
Did someone from your family ever visit India after the incident?
So one of my uncles visited because he's a British national, and on his British passport, so they didn't realize that he was, from the family. And again, his visit there nearly created a riot, and then
his visit created a riot.
It was, then they had to come in and tell him that you can't visit these areas and you can't. And then I visited, I think in 2006, and again I was told specifically, please don't visit the MIM headquarters and don't visit the Muslim areas and don't tell people who you are, because they are scared that.
How did they get to know that you were the granddaughter of?
So basically, this trip was organized by Sri Ravi Shankar, who had gone to visit the Art of Living, and through his followers and all of that, they arranged this trip to Hyderabad, and then they had me meeting the mayor and all the officials there, and so the mayor, in fact, sort of requested that please,
Who was the mayor back then?
I think Reddy.
Okay.
Yeah. And then his family had history with Nanaba as well.
Okay. So what's your message for the people living in Hyderabad? What do they do to it's Qasim Rizvi is their hero, but they can't openly tell about them. What's your message for them?
I'm so sad that they have had to suffer so much for so many years. Since the Operation Polo, where 200,000 people were massacred, women were raped, people's properties were taken over. They've been suffering. So I can understand, that they would be very cautious and things like that. But I do see this new sort of passion in the youth, yourself. And I've had a lot of young people from Hyderabad Deccan getting in touch with me. wanting some guidance, some leadership, something, because they're very disappointed with MIM and the Owaisis and stuff like that. I mean, I'm hoping that we can somehow, come together, create some kind of a platform, primarily to set the record straight. I mean, I don't believe that all Hindus are crazy people and fanatics. They have been brainwashed and conditioned to hate with a very false narrative. We need to put the narrative straight. We need to present the facts, and give the counter narrative that the Hindu population is completely unaware of. Why is it not talked about that they were not able to prove a single allegation? Those allegations are still flung around by the state itself as if they're true,
Yeah.
But they were never proved to be true, and not proved by a military tribunal. It wasn't even just a normal court that,
He was just talking about some ridiculous case that he was finally caught in killing a cow or something.
Yeah, so kidnapping a cow or stealing a cow was the only allegation that they could prove against the Razakars or him. You know what I mean? All the other cases had to be dropped because there was no evidence. They were just blatant lies and accusations.
These Razakars were given a military training. It was an armed struggle for the freedom of Hyderabad. Why do you think that this didn't even last for 5 days when the Indian army was moving inside? Why did this collapse?
So apparently, number one, the army, the Indian army itself did not fight. It was only the Razakars, and they were not equipped.
Hyderabad army.
The Hyderabad army apparently did not really fight the Indian army.
Yeah.
Right? And so it was basically left to the Razakars to defend. And they had basic military training, but they were not armed. They had sticks and stones and knives. So it was a bit ridiculous to think that they could, and then shortly after, the Nizam himself sort of resigned, conceded. There was also hope that, that Pakistan army would sort of intervene, or there would be an international outcry, but none of those things really came to fruition because everything came to a standstill when the Nizam said, okay, and basically blamed everything on the Razakars and said that he was held hostage and the Razakars were the people, who was the aggressor.
So you just stated about Mr. Owaisi. What's your message for Mr. Owaisi? He's heading the party of your grandfather. It was more of Democratic Party back then. Your grandfather, he was not given it as a gift. Bahadur Yar was the president, then it was democratic election that took place in the party, and then Qasim Rizvi got elected as the president. But after Qasim Rizvi gave it to Abdul Wahid Owaisi, it's more about nepotism. It's the third generation that's controlling the MIM. So what's your message for them?
You see, we go to the history. The thing was that at that point, nobody was willing to take up the leadership of MIM. They were too scared, right? So the Owaisi family at least had the courage to step forward and say, okay, we will take this forward. But for them to survive in that political environment, they had to obviously compromise, and they had to give up something of their past, including how they talk about my grandfather and all of that. It had to be more in line.
I was just listening to a speech made by Mr. Asaduddin Owaisi, the member of parliament from Hyderabad. So he was saying, ये रज़ाकारों की मजलिस नहीं है, ये क़ासिम रिज़वी की मजलिस नहीं है, ये हिंदुस्तान के दस्तूर को मानने वाली मजलिस है. So what's your take on that?
So I think that again, they were forced to make these kind of statements to actually be a political entity within the Indian state. Otherwise, they would have not been allowed to participate in the political
elections,
system. So that one can understand their restrictions or whatever. But what I'm disappointed in is the fact that I keep hearing from the youth of Hyderabad Deccan that they're very disappointed, and they feel that this party is not really representing their concerns or their aspirations, and that is something that I would want the party to really look into and see why is there a disconnect. You know, what direction do the Muslim youth want them to go in?
Do you think Qasim Rizvi is still relatable, or is he out of context for the youth today?
So I'm surprised, because for the longest time, I think our parents' generation was very scared to associate themselves with Qasim Rizvi, and they'd kind of put it aside, and even if they had a lot of sympathies, they would not really discuss it. But I think it's this new generation, having seen what has become of India, that has suddenly a renewed interest in the past and is seeing Qasim Rizvi as a kind of a hero, of someone who did not compromise and who told them and predicted what would happen in the future. And so all those things are coming back, and there's a renewed interest, and they're wanting to learn more about him, and a lot of people are contacting me as well, because of my association with him. So I think there is and it's been forced upon them because of the situation that the Muslims in India are facing today.
So he passed away in 1970, is it?
Yes, early 70s.
Okay, so by that time the struggle for Bangladesh, the breakaway of East Pakistan had already begun. So even if he was not associated with the mainstream Indian Muslim politics, he was somehow related to the Muslim politics of India of that time. So what was his take on breaking away of East Pakistan? It was really disheartening.
That, after the demise of Quaid-e-Azam, I think he felt, and then Atiya Khan soon after was assassinated, and so the core leadership in Pakistan as well, which had been part of the independence movement and the formation of Pakistan, were all gone, and he could not connect with the new leadership that had come up, or the new politics of the subcontinent was not something that he could endorse or be a part of.
So what's your advice for youth and more of people living in Karachi, those who actually belong to Hyderabad? I mean, they've already dissociated themselves from Hyderabad. I don't think many of them are very proud of their Hyderabadi ancestry. I mean, you find Gujaratis, the Memon community, for instance, and other communities that are very prevalent in Karachi. But there's Hyderabadi community is not as prevalent in Karachi as it should have been, because there was a huge migration that took place from Hyderabad to Karachi. So how do they associate themselves with Hyderabad, and what do they do? What's your stand on that?
I think again, the whole Hyderabadi community, not just in Pakistan, but they're spread all over the world. It's kind of like this lost community.
Yeah.
We didn't separate during the time of partition. It was 2 years later. It's sad.
So actually, there's a English author, I don't remember her name. She has actually combined there's a lot of research she has done. She has almost done 12 years of research on Hyderabadis all over the world. She has traveled to UK, Canada, Australia, and Karachi. So everyone around the globe is very much they want to associate themselves with Hyderabad, the ancestry, but only the people in Karachi, they have dissociated themselves. They're not very proud of it.
So there's another dynamic that has been happening in Pakistan as well, which is the Muhajir phenomena, right? So a lot of the people who migrated from India have felt that they were not really accepted properly into Pakistan, that that they were not considered the son of the soil and so forth. So there's another whole drama unfolding there. So they have their own political party, which is not as popular now. It used to be very, very popular in Karachi, called the Mahajir Qawmi Movement. MQM. So वो एक struggle अलग से चल रहा है, and I think that that can be seen in context of that. That the Mahajirs have felt kind of sidelined,
left away.
Yeah.
So did any Hyderabadi rose up to fame in Pakistan?
So my mother herself has been part of the MQM, and she's been like a member of assembly.
Did that did she play the Qasim Rizvi card while fighting the elections? Was she known as a daughter of Qasim Rizvi, or she had an independent?
Well, no. So within the political party, obviously they are very much aware that she is the daughter of Qasim Rizvi, and that gives her the political background, so to speak. But she was elected. She was not elected. She didn't fight general elections. She was on the reserve seat. So she was just given the position of an MNA without having to fight elections as such.
So why did she leave the party? Why did she leave the
elections? So
elections?
she didn't actually leave the party formally. What happened was that there was a new law introduced in Pakistan Parliament that if you have dual nationality, then you have to either give up your nationality or give up your seat. So she chose to give up her seat. She had a Canadian nationality. But it was also at a time when my father was very unwell, and she wanted to kind of take a back seat and look after him. So she kind of withdrew a little bit for personal reasons. And then after that, the party went through a lot of turmoil. There was a lot of opposition against MQM. Well, not so much MQM, but Altaf Hussain, who used to make these very inflammatory kind of statements, some considered anti-Pakistan statements and stuff like that. So that created a big division within the party, and the party got fragmented. And so the MQM has gone through like a lot of problems.
Which is the most popular party today within the Muhajirin?
Well, there is no other party that represents the Muhajirs. The MQM is the only Muhajir party as such. But I think and then they were basically a Karachi party, because most of the Muhajirs were settled in Karachi. But I think that PTI has kind of, at least for certain areas within Karachi, they've won a lot of support. Imran Khan has kind of chipped into that popularity or the vote bank a little bit. But having said that, we don't really know, because the last elections, they didn't do very well. But there was a call by Altaf Hussain not to vote. So we don't know whether it was because of that call that the attendance was very low, or whether the loyalties have shifted. So it depends what happens in the next election.
Do you believe any genuine leadership will emerge in the coming days for most of the genuine Muslim leadership? Do you think any genuine Muslim leadership would emerge in the coming days?
In India, you mean?
In India, Pakistan, and the Indian subcontinent. There's been no dynamic leader in the past few years.
You think?
Yeah. I mean, the stature of Qasim Rizvi or Quaid-e-Azam, there's been no other leader of that stature, of that caliber.
Yeah. But it's they also say that the leadership reflects the community, right? And I think that if you look at the community and the people of that time, their stature was very high as well. So they deserved leadership of that caliber, because they were willing to give their lives, they were willing to come forward, they were willing to fight, and therefore they were represented by people of similar caliber. I mean, aajkal, the youth is more about earning money and having a great life, and it's like religion and politics is not that important. That spirit of fighting for your rights and that whole ethos has kind of been damaged, come down a lot. And not just in the Muslim community. I mean, you look at the Western community as well, civil rights movement, Luther King and, all those wonderful leaders of the civil rights movements and all of that. Where are they today? I mean, we went through a whole period of all our civil rights being taken away. First, war on terror, take away people's rights. Then COVID, take away people's rights. Nobody has really. And then, of course, the amount of censorship, the amount of media being controlled, even social media now, people are not even allowed to express themselves freely. So it's a very strange world that we're living in.
What was your feeling when you landed in Hyderabad? I mean, even if you were not supposed to disclose your ancestry, it must have been a very emotional moment for you to land, to have your feet on the land that your grandfather fought for.
Yes, it's very emotional. And then I wanted to go and see where our house was. Went there, found out that it's a huge housing community now. That one house is now like different neighborhoods and lots of homes there. And so obviously a lot it has changed. It's become a very modern city, and but yes, it's a very, very emotional, and you don't even have to physically be there. It's just that connection is very, very deep and emotional.
Did you ever taste Hyderabadi food?
Yes, I've even grown up with Hyderabadi food. My grandmother, of course, and my mother, and yes.
So, what's your take on Hyderabadi biryani like?
I mean, I think Hyderabadi food is the best, isn't it? Yeah. Bagare, Bengan, and everything. Yeah.
So, is the Hyderabadi language still prevalent in Karachi, as in among the Disposa that has moved
not
to Karachi?
Not the new generation, but of course the older generation used to have that very typical way of
How
speaking.
And Nakova, especially.
But so, not so much anymore.
That's it for today.
Thank you.
So, thank you so much for your time and your patience.
Not at all.
Thank you.
Thank you.